What is up, everybody? We're back. Corey Hughes, Bloody History. I think today we're going to wrap up this Roy Truly file. And let's see what's remaining. A lot of this has been stuff that hasn't directly had to do with Roy Truly. Maybe he was connected to it in some way, but it's all been surrounding the book depository. And once we get done with this, I think tomorrow I'll go through, I have a stack of witness statements of people who were in the book depository. And it actually includes one from Jack Kaysen, but there's a couple things that you'll notice about these statements when we go over them tomorrow. Is that they're all copy and paste. They're all the same. They all say the same things. They all make sure to say the same things, with few exceptions. So this document that we're going to go over was the very first time years ago when I found it for the first time, and I was reading through it. It was the first time I ever had really any kind of inkling that there could be a chance that Oswald didn't work at the book depository or was not at the book depository, and that it was actually William Seymour. The thing that gave me the inclination to believe that was that there was at least half a dozen, maybe 7 or 8 statements in this stack of statements that people who should have known or seen Oswald, and they never did. They never saw him, never knew him, including who? The 2 owners of the company. Jack Kaysen never saw Oswald ever, and O.V. Campbell never saw Oswald ever. Okay? So who does that leave in the chain of command to have seen Oswald or interacted with Oswald? Well, that would bring us to William Shelley, who was the warehouse manager, who would have been a supervisor of Oswald, right? So we have William Shelley, and we have Roy Truly, okay? Despite the fact that Jack Kaysen and O.V. Campbell were in the book depository every day, they had offices on the first and second floor, you would, at a minimum, have seen Oswald somewhere, coming to work, leaving work, outside on a break, at his lunch, whatever. For a very short time, back in 2000, God, it must have been 5, maybe 4, just before I was the job I had right before I was a cop, I think. I think I was working at this place I did background checks, and it was all on the computer. I would look up people's computer records and just verify records. That was all I ever did. It was the most boring fucking job ever. And but it was it looked like a big call center when you were in there. It was all cubicles, and there must have been 200 people on that floor. And there were other businesses in there too. And while I didn't know anybody, you'd see the same people all the time, right? You'd see the people around you all the time. And in the book deposit, and that was a business with probably had 300 to 400 people in the building. And here in the book depository, you only had 60-something people in that building total. Every single person would have seen every other person in that building in the time that they worked there. Not every day, but at some point over time, they would have encountered other people, right? They would have encountered everybody. Everybody would have seen everybody at some point. But yet, there's a whole bunch of statements of people who never saw Oswald. And the reason I think they never saw Oswald was because on a daily basis, they were seeing William Seymour. And so then when Oswald was on TV, they didn't make the connection. They're like, oh, he worked at the book depository? That's funny. I never saw him. That kind of thing. Now, when it came to the guys who directly worked in the book depository, I believe they all identified William Seymour as Oswald. However, once Oswald pops up on television and it's a different guy, how the fuck do you think they felt? How would you feel? How would you feel if every day you went to work and for a month and a half you worked with this guy named Lee Harvey Oswald, and you're just another guy, right? But then all of a sudden, Lee Harvey Oswald is alleged to have shot the president, and then when you see Lee Harvey Oswald on TV, the guy you're supposed to have worked with, it's a different guy. How would you feel about that? What would you do? Would you go to the cops yelling and screaming, hey, that's not Lee Harvey Oswald? Or would you just be scared to death? Add to that people coming around and telling you probably keep your mouth shut. And I think that's exactly what people did. They kept their mouth shut. That's why I think people who were not in the loop couldn't identify Oswald as having been in the building, right? And Jack Kaysen He probably didn't know who the patsy was, right? I assume Jack Kaysen is involved in the assassination because there's zero information reference Jack Kaysen. It's like his entire life was deleted. You got to find a grave on him. You got an obituary. You got a very little bit of information that indicates he was the head of the American Legion in Dallas, and that he had some connection to some other like FBI agents and other guys who would be involved. But to me, it's crazy because there's no statement on what Jack Kaysen did all day. Whether he says he didn't see Oswald and that he never knew Oswald or saw Oswald in his statement, which is probably true because he said he left at 12:10. Our first sightings of the guys on the 6th floor with rifles is between 12:10 and 12:15 by Arnold Rowland and his wife. So I think it's pretty goddamn obvious that Jack Kaysen is the one who let these guys in the building. Roy Truly obviously in on it because Roy Truly throws Oswald under the bus for no fucking reason, right? He identifies William Seymour on the stairs and says it's and doesn't say it's Oswald. He says he's an employee, right? So he knows that William Seymour was working there because he identified him as an employee, right? Plain and simple. He had to have been on this from the jump. I'd like to know more about the relationship between Roy Truly and Jack Kaysen. O.V. Campbell seems like he wasn't in the loop on this. He really didn't seem to know anything, and he was just kind of out front when everything went down. But it appears to be the connections in this building that are from the top down, from Jack Kaysen to Roy Truly to William Shelley. And then William Shelley, who knows what kind of relationship you end up having with your guys when you're an immediate supervisor like that, right? So I worked in the weed grow for a long time, right? And you have a head grower, and then you got everybody else you work with, right? And so your relationship with the head grower is different, right? The boss, so to speak. But not the boss of the company, just the boss of your little division. That's William Shelley. He's the boss of the division, right? And so there's always a camaraderie there, right? There'd be a camaraderie between William Shelley and his guys. William Shelley, I'm pretty convinced, was CIA. He was OSS, and those guys in OSS, him and O.V. Campbell and these guys, they went into, and even Roy Truly, I think, they all worked for the book depository, like right after 47, right? 47, 49, something like that. But this is CIA publishing. Right? I promise you, these guys, like O.V. Campbell and Jack Kaysen, they had intelligence circles. You don't go into a business distributing textbooks just out of the blue, right? And you'd be a fool to think that the textbook industry isn't run by the CIA. That's where the narrative starts, with brainwashing kids in schools, right? Textbooks. Texas School Book Depository. Clearly a CIA operation. I'm going to have to do a lot more digging into that. There's a good article by William Weston on the Texas School Book Depository and the Spider's Web or something like that. And also there's an article by William Weston on Kennedy's and King, which is a De Eugenio site, but I fucking hate that scumbag traitor, so I try not to recommend his shit ever. But all right, let's go back to the document. Roy Truly. Other individuals and organizations involved of interview. Roy Truly, memorandum, March 12th, 64. Mr. J. Lee Rankin. From Bert W. Griffin. As indicated in our memorandum of March 6, 1964, concerning the testimony of Early and Roberts, we met on Saturday, March 7th with Mr. Redlick, Mr. Slauson, Mr. Willens, and Mr. Eisenberg and Mr. Eli. There was general agreement that further investigation would be appropriate along the lines outlined in that memorandum. Accordingly, further work was divided in the following manner. Mr. Griffin and Mr. Hubert. A. Further investigation of Jesse Willard Lynch and Wilburn Walden Litchfield, as indicated in paragraph 7A of the March 7th memorandum. B. Background information and physical description of Bertha Cheek and Early and Roberts. Early and Roberts is the lady at the boarding house, 1026 North Beckley, also happened to be the sister of Bertha Cheek, associated Jack Ruby. C. Checkout of report from Mr. and Mrs. Arturo Alicer Ruiz, Alcocerruiz. D. Investigation of Ruby's Cuban activities. E. Further investigation with respect to Leopoldo Ramos, Ducos, and Teamsters. F. Detailed statement of activities of Bertha Cheek on November 21st to 25th to be provided by deposition. Let's see if we can't find the Bertha Cheek deposition. Okay, guys, or any statements or interviews of Bertha Cheek. That'll bring us down to the boarding houses. Number 2, Mr. Ball and Mr. Bellin. A. Obtain copies of registration records for rooming houses of Mrs. Bledsoe and Mrs. Johnson for the period of September 26, 1963 to January 1st, 1964, and identify all other rooming house records presently retained by Mrs. Bledsoe and Mrs. Johnson. Details as to persons whom Oswald could have expected to be present at 1026 North Beckley when he returned after the assassination on November 22nd. C. Detailed statement of activities of Bertha Cheek and Earlene Roberts on November 21st through the 25th to be provided by the deposition or interrogation before the commission. D. Determination of police cars in the vicinity at 1026 North Beckley at 1 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, including car 207. Detailed statements from Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, and Mrs. Roberts concerning their activities and communications between the time that Oswald returned to the North Beckley address and Mr. Johnson called the Dallas Police Department to inform police that he had seen the Oswald picture on television. F. Handwriting evaluation of piece of paper turned over to the Dallas Police by Mr. Roberts on which she claims Lee Oswald wrote the name O.H. Lee and which she used to maintain the account for O.H. Lee. Also determination of whether or not it was a normal practice to keep accounts on a scrap of paper such as the one in question. Yeah, it's kind of funny. She just wrote the shit on a little scrap of paper, like not in a book or nothing. It was totally written after the fact. Because remember, they found Herbert Leon Lee, okay, stayed in room O, okay? So what are the odds of H. Lee staying in room O? And there also being an O.H. Lee at the same fucking place. Give me a break. It's ridiculous. This is where it, like, fucking insults our intelligence. 3, Mr. Mosk. Check classified advertising columns of Dallas Morning News and all other Dallas newspapers on file at the Library of Congress for the period of October 10th to 15th to determine whether or not there appears, allegedly on October 15th, 1963, the personal column advertisement, Running Man. Please call me. Please. Please. Signed, Lee. Also, a check of all advertisements, both classified and regular entertainment ads, for any advertisements placed by Jack Ruby with respect to entertainment at the Carousel Club or Vegas Club, sale of either club, solicitation of a partner, or any other matter. With respect to the entertainment ad for the Carousel and Vegas clubs, it will be sufficient to note the general character of the ad, the date upon which the ad changes, and the nature of the change. Mr. Stern, 4. The termination of when Oswald's picture first appeared on television in Dallas, together with station which carried photograph and, if possible, source of the photograph. 5. Mr. Slauson provides statement of Sylvia Odio to Hubert and Griffin. Number 6. Mr. Redlick, A. Citation to all statements of Earlene Roberts. Details as to how and when Oswald first became a suspect. Information so far is that Mr. Truly notified Fritz. Fritz checked police records and learned, while checking, that Oswald was presently being held at the City Hall in connection with Tippit murder. Question remains as how Truly came to notice that Oswald was missing, since Truly presumably did not work closely with Oswald. C. Determination of how police happened to go to 1026 North Beckley. Exactly. All this information is extremely fucking relevant. There's no reason that any of those people should have had any information reference 1026 North Beckley. 7. Mr. Eisenberg. A determination of how Oswald got room at 1026 North Beckley. There has been a general inference that Oswald obtained room by finding an ad in a newspaper or by seeing a sign in a window. However, Mrs. Johnson has stated that when Oswald first inquired about a room, she told him that she did not have a room available other than the one next to Mrs. Roberts, which ordinarily was not rented out. Thus, Mrs. Johnson's story would suggest that no advertisement or sign attracted Oswald's attention to the 1026 North Beckley address. In connection with this inquiry, it may be relevant to ascertain how Oswald happened to return to the 1026 North Beckley address after he had been told a room was not available. Did Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Roberts contact him? What other rooming house did Oswald inquire at? All extremely valid questions. Obviously, it was set up by Jack Ruby, and it was obviously Carrie Thornley staying there. Now, people will say, well, how did all Oswald's shit get into that room? Well, obviously, Carrie Thornley put it there. Duh. Simple. B, what was the source of the material used in counterfeiting the Alec Heidel identification cards? Were these cards really found in his billfold? Okay, so let me talk about this really quickly. From what I've gathered, this card was planted in the wallet that was planted by Westbrook at the Tippit shooting, but that wallet never made it into evidence. But the card, Alec Heidel card that was in it, somehow made it into Oswald's property. And if you'll remember, Graham, the cop Graham, who interviewed and searched Oswald, said that he found 2 identifications on Oswald. So now here we have another point of possible intervention. We know it was planted by Westbrook in the wallet at the Tippit shooting, and it made its way back to police headquarters. The wallet disappears, the card does not. On a side note, we also know that handwriting analysis could not show that it was Oswald's handwriting, and I believe other investigators have proven or shown strong evidence to the fact that it was Marina who forged the signature, as that handwriting matched the handwriting on the back of the Killer of Fascists or Hunter of Fascists photograph involving George de Mohrenschildt, right? You following? Okay, cool. So, was this card really found in his billfold? Well, like I said, it was found in the wallet planted by Westbrook. Now, the point of possible intersection here is was the card planted by Graham, or had it already been put into Oswald's pocket? Because it's most certainly possible that the card itself was just put into his pocket, right? So I've done this myself. Had a prisoner handcuffed, had all of his property out on the table, looking at it, and knowing that he's about to go off to jail, and I want him to have all of his property, I would just take his property and put it in a shirt pocket, or I'd even just put it in a pants pocket. So I didn't have to carry it. And that would be acceptable, because then it would just be checked in at the jail, right? So it's completely feasible that this identification that was planted by Westbrook at the Tippit shooting was then simply just put into Oswald's property and stuck in his pocket. Like, it's 100% possible. And that's what Graham said. It says here, the Secret Service inventory shows copies of the Selective Service card in the billfold at the police property room on November 24th. The original was in a metal box, which allegedly came from his room at 1026 North Beckley. The various reports state that the card was originally on his person. Were materials similar to those used in the counterfeit cards available to any of the employers where Oswald had previously worked? Meaning, did Oswald manufacture it at Jaggers Child Stovall or any of those places? Let me reread this because something caught my attention. The Secret Service inventory shows copies of the Selective Service card in the billfold at the police property room on November 24th. The original was in a metal box, which allegedly came from his room at 1026 North Beckley. The various reports state that the card was originally on his person. So here we have a conflict in how the card actually got to him, because the card probably was in his pocket and on his person. But then some other idiot who brought the fucking box in from the Payne's residence, or wherever the fuck it was, from the boarding house or whatever. Remember, it was Carrie Thornley at the boarding house. Carrie Thornley could have easily planted it, because he was with Marina in the fucking backyard photographs. He was with Marina in Alice, Texas, and all through Texas, at the radio station and all that stuff, and at the diner, and at the furniture store in Irving, right? Clearly Carrie Thornley masquerading as Oswald that whole time. So it's a very simple chain of custody of the Selective Service card, if in fact it did come from the boarding house, right? So it could have come from either way. But you see here there's a conflict, and nobody can get their story straight, which is a theme here in the assassination. All right, next document. FBI 21264. Mr. Roy Truly, Superintendent, Texas School Book Depository, advised that Eddie Piper is the only Negro janitor employed by the Texas School Book Depository, and that he was so employed on November 22nd, 1963. Mr. Truly stated Piper is in his 50s and is still employed at the Texas School Book Depository. Mr. Truly stated that Harold Dean Norman, who was one of the individuals who observed the assassination from the 5th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, is the only employee who has left the employ of Texas School Book Depository since the assassination. He stated that Norman left his Texas School Book Depository job a few days prior to January 1st, 1964, to take another job. Mr. Truly stated he had received several inquiries on the night of February 9th, 1964, concerning the Fort Worth Star-Telegram story concerning an alleged assassination witness being held in protective custody, and that he considered the entire story to be without basis, and that he is most anxious to determine the source for such story, and that should he do so, he would immediately advise the FBI. And that was written by Robert P. Gemberling. January 17, 64. On January 13, 1964, Mr. Roy Truly, Superintendent, Texas School Book Depository, 411 Elm Street, Texas, was contacted on another matter, at which time he advised that it was his firm conviction that Lee Harvey Oswald did not plan the assassination of President John F. Kennedy before approximately 10:30 a.m. on November 21st, 1963. Truly pointed out that although he has since learned that the parade route of the presidential motorcade was made public on November 19th, 1963, it's actually the 18th, that's incorrect, he has noticed in these articles after reading them after November 22nd, 1963, that the parade route was buried at the end of an article in which the heading and main theme concerned the seating arrangements of the United States Senator Ralph Yarborough. Truly pointed out that unless a person read the article in its entirety, which most people would not do, they would not have seen the paragraph which mentioned the parade route. Truly noted that at approximately 10:30 a.m. on November 21st, 1963, the first issue of the Dallas Times-Herald appeared on the downtown streets of Dallas, displaying the schedule of the president's route prominently in the middle of the first page. Before this schedule appeared, Truly stated that he was completely unaware of the parade route, or, in fact, that there would even be a downtown parade, and that he heard no conversation from any of the employees at the TSBD concerning this parade. After the Times-Herald appeared on the downtown streets, there was immediately considerable excitement and conversation among the employees at the TSBD concerning the fact that the parade would pass right in front of their building. Truly also pointed out that the news media has erroneously stated that the only possible route a parade could take from downtown area to Dallas Trade Mart was past the TSBD. Truly pointed out that this is not true, and he knows at least two other routes from downtown area which would not pass in front of the TSBD. Truly stated that one way would have been to turn right off of Main Street onto Lamar to the Continental Viaduct and then onto the Stemmons Freeway to the Trade Mart. The other way would have been to continue straight ahead on Main Street to Industrial Boulevard and then onto the Stemmons Freeway and the Trade Mart. Mr. Truly pointed out that he considered either of these two routes to be better from a political consideration, since they both went through factory districts where large numbers of industrial employees might observe the parade route. However, the route chosen actually went through a predominantly white-collar district and passed very few, if any, industrial plants. That's pretty interesting, huh? So there were two additional other routes that it could have gone without having to completely undo the route. That is interesting. I'm going to log that as possibly relevant for something in the future. All right, another one, 12/19/63. We're going back in time here. I'm going to start to check these particular FBI files, and perhaps I'll start reading them backwards to you guys. Mr. Roy S. Truly, Warehouse Superintendent, Texas School Book Depository, 411 Elm Street, Dallas, on re-interview, advised that he employed Lee Harvey Oswald and knew him only as an employee. He never met nor heard of Jack Ruby prior to the time that Ruby killed Oswald, and knew of acquaintanceship, association, or connection between Oswald and Ruby. Did not know of an acquaintanceship between them. I'm still of the firm belief they didn't have one. Didn't have a relationship. I've seen no credible evidence that the person we know as Oswald interacted with any of these people, really, other than Kerry Thornley, possibly Clay Shaw. It's hard to say. 12/18/63, Mr. Roy Truly, superintendent, Tech School Book Depository, advised that on approximately December 16th, 63, a room adjoining the shipping room on the first floor of the Tech School Book Depository building was being cleaned and articles in there were being removed. He said that this room has been utilized by various employees who would leave articles of clothing as well as other articles from time to time in the room. He said that some of the colored men eat lunch in this room and play dominoes there. He said that in the course of this room being cleaned up, a blue jacket with gray quilting lining a zipper front was located, and that it was not claimed by any of the employees who have access to the room. He said that in view of this, he thought that perhaps it belonged to Lee Harvey Oswald, who was an employee of the book depository at the time of the assassination of the president. In front of this building on November 22nd, 63. Truly said that he had been unable to ascertain through inquiry among employees that this was Oswald's jacket or that anyone had specifically observed Oswald wearing it. He stated, however, that he himself had a vague recollection of having possibly seen Oswald wear a jacket similar to that in the past. He pointed out that he believed the morning of November 22nd, 63, it was cool enough that morning that a jacket would have been desirable at the time of the morning Oswald would have reported for work in the TSBD building. Okay, so, oh my God. I'm having an aneurysm. Call 911. Oh, fucking A. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how fucking bullshit rumors get started. You have a vague document, and then the JFK research community, who's a bunch of fucking faggots, just runs with bullshit. All right? Everyone now is convinced that Oswald had left this blue jacket in the fucking building. All the JFK jerk-offs fucking talk about it. This and the clipboard. All right? This and the bullshit clipboard. We're going to have to talk about the clipboard at some point, but not today. Okay, they're both nonsensical. And so I love these fucking sentences here. It says that nobody here, he talked to all the employees. Nobody ever saw him wear this jacket. He doesn't know where the jacket came from. He doesn't think anyone ever had this jacket. But he might have a vague recollection that Oswald had one possibly similar to this jacket, but he doesn't know. And he thinks it might have been cold that morning, so logic would dictate that Oswald had to have worn this jacket in, right? Like, this is the mental fucking gymnastics that these people have to go through to give this fucking document any kind of validity whatsoever, okay? It's not Oswald's fucking jacket. And if it would have been the jacket left there by a potential person who would have been Oswald there, it should have been a gray, more or less flannel wool type jacket, as has been described by liar Buell Frazier and his fucking sister, Linnie Mae Randall. Okay? I'm going to have to dig further into the Linnie Mae Randall story, because allegedly she had a couple friends over that morning who also saw Oswald. And I'm very interested in what those friends allegedly saw. Because we all know it wasn't Oswald, right? Because Oswald was at work without a jacket. He had on a brown shirt, allegedly, right? And the white t-shirt under it, right? But no, that's not what was seen on the stairs by Baker and Truly. That's not what anybody saw that day. Everybody said that he was wearing light-colored clothing. Oh my God, it's so obvious that it was fucking William Seymour at the book depository. It was so obvious. But yeah, no blue jacket. Fuck the blue jacket, it's not Oswald's. And fuck the clipboard if we ever get to it. All right. United States Secret Service Treasury Department. Let's see. Up here it says, reference handwritten notes, Roy Truly, William Shelley, Charles Givens. Billy Lovelady, Danny Ark, Frankie Kaiser. Frankie Kaiser's another one we got to pull up. Let's pull all information on Frankie Kaiser. And then you got another one, W something, Frogier. Frazier. Oh, it's William Frazier, duh. Harold Norman, James Jarman. Actually, it says Earl J. Jarman, so it must be Earl James Jarman Jr. And then Troy West. Troy West. This name pops up again. Troy West. Did you guys already pull out Troy West for me? I think you did. I'm not sure. If you haven't, please pull Troy West. All right, synopsis. This report covers inquiries which were made at the Tech School Book Depository, 411 Elm Street, Dallas, Texas. All employees who work in this building and who are present at work on November 22nd have been interviewed and set forth below, and written statements taken from those people who are able to furnish pertinent information concerning the assassination. All right. Details of investigation. Tech School Book Depository is a privately owned firm engaged in the warehousing and shipping of textbooks for various publishers. The books are shipped to schools in Texas and surrounding states. The firm presently occupies a building at 411 Elm Street, Dallas, Texas, and has occupied the building since January of 1962. No, that's false. July of 1963. It started to occupy the building in July of 63. Before that, it was over at the first floor of the Daltex building. Prior to that time, the firm was located at 501 Elm Street, Dallas, Texas, a.k.a. the Daltex building, which means that they were all kinds of uptight with fucking Sam Bloom and all those fucking guys, Jaffe, Morris Jaffe, all those guys, right? Zapruder. The presently occupied building is leased from Mr. D. Harold Bird, 6909 Vassar, Dallas, Texas, who has owned the building for many years. The officers of this company are Jack C. Kaysen, president, O.V. Campbell, vice president, Roy Truly, director and superintendent. So those three guys are the guys who basically are the directors of the company. I saw in some of my reading yesterday, it was also alleged that some other guys in intelligence were connected to the board of the company. The firm also furnishes office space for 7 publishing companies whose books and publications are handled by the Texas School Book Depository. These publishers are as follows: Lyons and Carnahan, room 201. Southwestern Publishing Company, room 203. Allen and Bacon, room 301. The Macmillan Company, room 302. The American Book Company, room 303. McGraw-Hill Book Company and their subdivision, Gregg Publishing Company, room 305, and Scott Forsman Company, room 401. The normal working hours for the employees of the Texas School Book Depository are from 8 o'clock till 4:45 p.m. with a 45-minute lunch period. The employees of the publishing companies have varying work schedules, but all of them are normally out of the building by 5 p.m. Mr. Eddie Piper, age 55, 3402 Munger Avenue, Dallas, telephone TA 52190, is employed at the Texas School Book Depository as a handyman and janitor. His normal hours are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and he usually works until 7 or 8 p.m. Among his duties are to clean the offices and toilets of the depository after all the employees have left for the day. He also checks to see that all the lights are out and doors locked before he leaves. During the evening hours, and usually after Piper leaves the building, 2 employees of the Acme Building and Maintenance Company, 1901 Laws Street, Dallas, come to the depository building, and they clean the offices of the publishing companies and the toilets on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th floors. These people usually leave the building around midnight. They are furnished with keys to the building and are required to lock the entrance when they leave. The building then remains unoccupied for the rest of the night. The Smith Detective Agency and Night Watch Service, 610 North Ackerd Street, Dallas, makes periodic checks of the building during the nighttime hours to determine whether all doors are locked and lights are out. The portions of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors not occupied by offices are used for book storage, and the entire 5th, 6th, and 7th floors are used for book storage. The actual filling of orders and packing of books for shipment takes place on the 1st floor of the building. During the period of December 2nd through 5th, 1963, all persons employed in this building were interviewed, and the results of these interviews are set forth as follows. Mr. Jack C. Kaysen, president of the Texas School Book Depository, stated that to his knowledge, he had never seen Oswald. Among Mr. Kaysen's duties is public relations, and he is away from the building much of the time in that capacity. On November 22nd, 1963, Mr. Kaysen left the building at about 11 a.m. to meet some friends who were arriving in town to attend his daughter's wedding, scheduled for November 23rd, 1963. Therefore, he was not in the building or in the area at the time of the assassination and had no knowledge of those events. So, Mr. Kaysen will later change his story. The statement he gives later is that he left at 12:10 p.m. Interesting, huh? Mr. O.V. Campbell, vice president of the depository, advised that although he does not have the title, he actually acts as office manager, takes care of the payroll, and does the hiring of office personnel. The office of this firm is located on the second floor of the building, and the office personnel has very little, if any, contact with the warehouse employees. Mr. Campbell continued that to his knowledge, he had never known Oswald and does not recall ever having seen him prior to the time Oswald's photograph was shown on television on the day of the shooting. At the time of the shooting, Mr. Campbell, who was standing on the steps of the front entrance of the depository building, was unable to furnish any pertinent information concerning the assassination. Mr. Campbell continued that Oswald had made no provisions for disposition of wages due him for the week of November 18, 1963. The actual amount due after deductions was $43.37, representing 4½ days' pay from Monday, November 18th to noon, November 22nd, 1963. All of the warehouse employees, including Oswald, are normally paid in cash on a twice-monthly basis. On October 31st, 1963, and on November 15th, 1963, Oswald was paid $104.41 in cash, representing wages less deductions for those periods. On December 3rd, 1963, Mr. Campbell wrote a company check 6052 in the amount of $43.37 payable to Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald and representing full payment due Oswald for his last week of employment. This check was turned over to Special Agent William N. Carter, Secret Service, for delivery to Mrs. Marina Oswald, widow. Mr. Campbell also furnished a copy of Oswald's W-4 form, which was executed on October 16, 1963, the first day of his employment. Mr. Roy S. Trulli, director of the Tech Schoolbook Depository and superintendent of operations, has been interviewed on several occasions between November 26th and December 4th. Mr. Trulli probably had more contact with Oswald than any of the other employees at the depository. So, interesting. Roy Trulli is definitely he's a weak link here. His behavior is extremely suspect, especially to Oswald, and why he threw him under the bus so quick. Mr. Trulli stated that Oswald's employment with this firm resulted from the following circumstances. On or about October 14, 1963, Mr. Trulli received a telephone call from a woman living in Irving, Texas. He had never heard of her prior to the time and did not recall her name until newspaper stories subsequent to the shooting on November 22, 1963. Mentioned a Mrs. Payne of Irving, Texas, and then he recalled that she was the woman from whom he had received the above-mentioned telephone call. Mrs. Payne stated that she had a young man staying at her home who was unemployed, in need of a job, and whose wife was expecting a child in the very near future. Mrs. Payne continued that she had a neighbor whose brother, Wesley Frazier, worked at the depository, and Frazier had stated that he thought there might be a job opening at the depository. Mr. Trulli stated that he did need a temporary order filler at the time, and that he told Mrs. Payne to have her friend come on down for an interview. On the following day, October 15, 1963, Lee H. Oswald came to Mr. Trulli's office for an interview, at which time he told Mr. Trulli that he was honorably discharged from the U.S. Marine Corps, that he had never been arrested or in any difficulty with police, and that he was badly in need of a job. Mr. Trulli decided to hire Oswald and told him to report for work the following day, which was October 16, 1963. During the first few hours of his employment, Oswald worked with other employees, learning the job of order filling, and after that, worked by himself. Mr. Trulli added that Oswald was a very quiet person and accomplished his duties in a satisfactory manner. Oswald was paid at a rate of $1.25 per hour, worked a regular day shift from 8 o'clock to 5:45 p.m., 5 days a week, and had never missed a day's work during the period of his employment, which ended at noon on November 22, 1963. Oswald's duties required that he on occasion visit the warehouse areas of all floors in the building, including the 6th floor. Mr. Trulli stated that at about 12:10 on November 22, 1963, he and Mr. O.V. Campbell, vice president of the depository, walked out the front entrance to the building and stood at the bottom of the steps waiting for the presidential motorcade to pass by. I just want to point out 12:10 is also the time that Jack Kaysen claims to have left the building. So at 12:10 p.m., allegedly, all three guys leave the building, probably together, and Kaysen just walks out the door. Or two of them walk out the door at 12:10 up front, and Mr. Kaysen then opens the back door for our shooters as he leaves through the back door. He never clarifies, whereas his car was parked to the west, but he never says. I think he says he went out front, but I don't believe it. Mr. Truly stated at 12:10 on November 22nd, he and Mr. Ovi Campbell, vice president of the depository, walked out front entrance and stood at the bottom of the steps waiting for the presidential motorcade to pass. He continued that the president's automobile passed his location at about 12:30 p.m., and a moment later, 3 shots rang out. Almost immediately, Roy Truly saw a motorcycle patrolman pushing through the crowd and heading for the entrance of the depository building. Mr. Truly ran inside the building with the patrolman and asked, "Where is the stairway?" Okay. Now we know there's some fuckery going on because the video doesn't show that. The film does not show that. The film of Baker getting off his motorcycle does not show him pushing through any crowd. It shows him running past the front doorway to the depository and running to the street, North Houston Street, past the building. That's what he does. So this statement here is bullshit. As they passed the shaft for the 2 freight elevators, Mr. Truly paused momentarily, and noting that neither of the 2 elevators was available, he directed the way back up the stairs. As Mr. Truly started up the stairway from the 2nd to the 3rd floor, he noticed that the patrolman was not with him, and at the same time, he heard the patrolman say something. Mr. Truly returned to the 2nd floor and saw the patrolman standing in the doorway leading to the lunchroom with his pistol drawn and pointed at Oswald, who was just then inside the lunchroom near the doorway. The patrolman asked Mr. Truly if he worked in the building, and Mr. Truly said yes. Remember, that's in direct contradiction to the statements in Baker's handwritten and typed statements. Then Mr. Truly and the patrolman continued up the back stairway to the 5th floor, where they found an elevator, and they rode the elevator to the 7th floor. Okay, so again, let me point out that there can be no confusion here. After this story happens here, and he allegedly goes back down to the 2nd floor and says, "Does this man work here?" And he says, "Yes." They then go back up to the 5th floor. Okay? They then go back up to the 5th floor. They never mention a second encounter with anybody on the 3rd or 4th floor. Never. Never. This whole thing's a fabrication. Then Mr. Truly and the patrolman continued up the back stairway to the 5th floor, where they found an elevator, and they rode the elevator to the 7th floor. They proceeded up a short stairway to the door leading out onto the roof of the building, where a quick examination of the rooftop area. They then returned to the 7th floor, got in the elevator, and proceeded down, stopping briefly at each floor to make a hurried search. When they arrived at the 1st floor, there were numerous people about, many of them police officers. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Truly noticed that most of the shipping and order room employees were congregated together in a group, and that Oswald was not among them. Mr. Truly immediately conveyed this information to one of the police officers. It is Mr. Truly's recollection that at the time he and the patrolman met Oswald at the lunchroom door. Shortly after the shooting, Oswald was dressed in light-colored clothing and probably a t-shirt. The above information was incorporated into a statement and executed by Mr. Truly. Additional information about the company and obtained from Mr. Truly is set forth as follows. Texaco Depository operates another warehouse located at 1917 North Houston Street, Dallas, Texas, and at the present time there are 3 men employed there, none of whom work at the building located at 411 Elm Street. These men are H.S. Aiken, foreman, Edward Shields, and Frank Hester. Employment in the shipping and order filling section, supervised by Mr. Truly, varies seasonally. The normal number of employees is 13 or 14, but in January, each year he hires about 4 extra personnel for 6 weeks to 2 months. Then again in June, he hires about 10 to 15 extra persons for the summer months, which is the busiest time for the company. In late August and September, most of these extra employees are dropped. However, about 3 to 5 of the extra employees are kept on during October, and then during the months of November and December, employment drops to the normal of about 13 or 14. Oswald was hired as a temporary employee and probably would have been dropped within the next week or two after November 22nd. Mr. Truly also advised that the office of his firm usually employs about 17 persons and that they sometimes hire an extra 1 or 2 persons during the summer months. Employees who work in the shipping and ordering filling section do not punch a time card. Mr. William Shelley, the senior employee in that section, makes a visual check of those present and reports to Mr. Truly if anyone does not show up for work. Attendance and employment records have been seized by the FBI and were not available for examination. You know, it's funny because I swear to God I read that there were time cards. that showed Oswald with perfect attendance, despite all the other sightings of Oswald elsewhere. With regard to the boxes of books, which were stacked in a disorderly fashion near the sixth-floor window from which the shots were fired, Mr. Truly advised that several of his regular employees were engaged in laying a new plywood floor on the sixth floor and had temporarily moved these boxes of books to clear an area in which they were working. Mr. Truly was questioned about the identity of the first law enforcement officer to reach his building after the shooting, and he stated to his knowledge, the first officer to enter the building was the motorcycle patrolman whose activities were previously described in this report. This officer had been identified as Patrolman M.L. Baker, Dallas Police Department, and had a copy of his statement was obtained. He further stated that no one contacted him regarding security measures prior to the visit of the president to Dallas. Mr. William Shelley, senior employee in the shipping and order filling department, was interviewed on December 2nd, 1963. He acts as foreman of that section, although he does not have the title. Mr. Shelley is 37 years of age. He lives at 126 South Tatum Avenue in Dallas. Telephone FE71969. He has been employed by the Texaco Depository continuously since October 1945. Mr. Shelley furnished the information that Oswald worked directly under his supervision, that he normally spoke to Oswald 3 or 4 times a day concerning the work, but that he never had any social conversations or any association outside of work with Oswald. He continued that Oswald was always at work on time, never missed a day's work, and that he learned the operations of his job faster than any other new employee they had hired. Shelley continued that Oswald never took part in conversations with the other employees and appeared to want to be left alone. On the day of the shooting, Mr. Shelley last saw Oswald about 11:50 a.m., at which time Oswald was working at his normal duties on the first floor. It is Mr. Shelley's recollection that Oswald was wearing khaki trousers and a T-shirt. The other employees of the shipping and order filling department were interviewed, and the information obtained from them is set forth as follows. Eddie Piper, 3402 Munger Avenue. Telephone TA1-2190, Dallas, employed as a janitor and normally works 10 to 7 or 8. Piper stated that he had never become closely acquainted with Oswald, although he had occasion to see him many times each day in connection with their work. About 12 noon on November 22nd, 1963, Piper last saw Oswald on the first floor, and at that time said, "I'm going up to eat lunch." Piper stated that he ate lunch on the first floor, and he was still on that floor at the time of the shots. That he looked up at the clock, and it was 12:25 p.m. Piper did not see Oswald again. Charles D. Givens, 37 Cochran Street, Dallas, telephone RI 24670, has been employed at this firm for about 2 months as a general laborer. He had never had any contact with Oswald other than to say hello. On November 22nd, 1963, Givens, along with other employees working on the 6th floor, was laying new plywood floor. Givens stated that he saw Oswald on the 6th floor at about 11:45 a.m. on that date, and that Oswald was carrying a clipboard that appeared to have some orders on it. Givens felt that Oswald was looking for some books to fill an order, which is his job, and did not give the matter further thought. Shortly thereafter, Givens and the other employees working on the floor laying project quit for lunch, and they took both elevators. They were racing the elevators to the first floor, and Givens heard Oswald call to them to send one of the elevators back up. It was Givens' recollection that Oswald was wearing a brown shirt when he last saw him. After Givens ate lunch, he left the building and was several blocks away at the time the shooting took place. He had gone to visit a friend who was employed in a nearby parking lot. Billy Nolan Lovelady, 7722 Hume Drive, Dallas, stated that he has been employed with this firm for about 2 years as a stockman. He stated that he never got to know Oswald, that he was not friendly, was a wise guy and a loner, and that he, Lovelady, decided to let him alone and not try to get friendly with him. The other employees usually play dominoes during their lunch period after they have eaten, but Oswald never showed any interest in taking part in the games. On November 22nd, 1963, Lovelady last saw Oswald about 10 a.m., although Lovelady was in one of the elevators coming down from the 6th floor at about noon, and he had heard Oswald ask him to send up one of the elevators. Lovelady was one of the employees working on the floor laying project on the 6th floor. Daniel Garcia Ark, 1502 Bennett Street, Dallas, telephone TA 1-3289, has been employed for about 3 months as a general laborer. He had never become well acquainted with Oswald, although he knew him by name. On November 22nd, 1963. Oh. And that statement cuts off. And that statement cuts off. So Oswald intentionally stayed distant from everybody. That's what we're getting from everybody's statements, right? Oswald was a loner and a rebel. That's going to do it for today. We're going to pick up here tomorrow. I'm on page 105 of 116, and we have another statement from Roy Truly. It looks like a pretty long one here, 2 pages. And we're going to get through that, and we will pick it up from there. So I have started a new project, bloodyhistory.substack.com. It is dedicated to World War II, the Holocaust, and all good things surrounding Uncle H. So if you're interested, I would highly recommend. It's $5 a month, but it's another daily. You get a show every day from me. It's going to be 5 days a week. You're going to get about an hour a day. And so I highly recommend that you head over to Substack, bloodyhistory.substack.com. Sign up for my new endeavor. It's got a bunch of episodes already. And we will continue to expose the truth. It's going to do it for me, guys. I'm tired. See you guys tomorrow.